Good day and welcome to the official launch of the EnGenDER project by the government of St. Lucia. Before we tell you a bit more about this project and continue on this afternoon's proceedings, I now invite Ms. Amos from the Department of Gender Relations to lead us in prayer.
It is good to give thanks. Dear God, we thank you for today, for the opportunity afforded us to celebrate at a time when there is so much pain and despair. We thank you for your protection from hazards and disasters. As we meet in this forum to launch an initiative that seeks to bring relief to those most adversely affected by the COVID pandemic, we ask that you bless those who have provided the resources. We ask for wisdom for those who have to coordinate the use of those resources, and we ask for grace for the beneficiaries of those resources. Bless what they will receive and multiply their resources. Help them to use them to the honor and the glory of your name. We pray for the success of these proceedings and for the safety of all in it. In Jesus' name, we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Joseph, for those words, and good afternoon and good day once again. Welcome to the official launch of the EnGenDER project by the government of St. Lucia. EnGenDER, or Enabling Gender-Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean, seeks to provide income support for women affected by COVID-19, as well as other support mechanisms. My name is Tony Nicholas, and I will be your host for today's proceedings, where we will hear much more about the project from our various presenters here today joining us in studio as well as via Zoom. We are live as well on NTN, Facebook, YouTube, and on WVNT 93.5 FM. Present with us today, we have Honorable Dr. Gail Rigobert, Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development. We also have Honorable Guy Joseph, Minister for Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation. In studio with us, Honorable Leonard Montoute, Minister for Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment. Also in our midst, Ms. Jani Joseph, Director, Gender Relations, Ms. Robin Darrell, President of the St. Lucia National Rural Women Network, permanent secretaries, other invited guests, and joining us via Zoom, Mr. Hugo Blanco, Resident Representative, UNDP Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Steve Jaltima, and he is the Counselor, Political, Canadian High Commission in Barbados, Ms. Tony Broadburn, Representative, UN Women, Multi-Country Office, Caribbean. We invite you to join us for these proceedings today, as you'll be hearing a lot more as to what is happening with the EnGenDER project. But to deliver the welcome address, the official welcome address, I now invite Ms. Jani Joseph, Director of Gender Relations, to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Minister of Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation, Honorable Guy Joseph. Minister of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development, Honorable Dr. Gail T.C. Rigobert. Minister of Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment, Honorable Leonard Montoute. Acting Representative of UN Women, Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean, Ms. Tony Ann Broadburn, and her hard-working team. Acting Representative, Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Hugo Blanco, and his hard-working, helpful, and highly flexible team. Political Counselor of the Canadian High Commission in Barbados, Mr. Steve Jaltima, and the Canada Honorary Council Ms. Paul Turnell John, who's also present with us. Permanent Secretary from the Department of Economic Development, from the Ministry of Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation, Mr. Claudius Emmanuel. Other permanent secretaries and heads of departments joining us from the various ministries, including the Department of Sustainable Development, Education, Innovation and Gender Relations, Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment, Ministry of Health and Wellness, and heads of departments from other agencies. Representative from the department, from the St. Lucia Fire Service, and officials from the Royal St. Lucia Police Force joining us virtually. President of the St. Lucia Network of Rural Women's Producers, Executive Director of the St. Lucia Crisis Center, President of the National Council of and for Persons with Disabilities, Manager of the Women's Support Center, all joining us virtually, hardworking colleagues of the National Mechanism for Decision Making for the EnGenDER project in St. Lucia, other invited guests, listeners, and viewers. It is my distinct honor and immense pleasure to welcome you to one of the few bright and beautiful moments in this time of much uncertainty and despair brought on by the economic and social impacts of the global COVID pandemic. I convey greetings to you from St. Lucia. It is unfair that our partners overseas are unable to see the bright and beautiful skies above our luscious hills and bright blue seas. It is our hope that you can once again visit our beautiful island and share the abundance of sights, cultural events, cuisines, beaches, crafts, and all of the beautiful things that define us. We are here to say thank you and to raise awareness of an initiative that adds to the numerous strides that the government of St. Lucia has made in its COVID-19 response. Throughout the presentations to come, you will hear of the groundbreaking work being done in St. Lucia and regionally through the EnGenDER project. You will hear of the generous offer of the Canadian government to reprogram some of its funding for that project to the COVID response in participating countries. You will hear how St. Lucia has approached the COVID response under this project, and you will appreciate why gender-responsive planning changes outcomes and better enable us to achieve our developmental goal of leaving no one behind. I take this opportunity to welcome all of you who have made your attendance at this event a priority, and especially thank the Government of Canada, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the UNDP, UN Women, and all other partners who have made this day possible at all. We look forward to a fruitful session today and to the implementation of this initiative in St. Lucia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. And I see that lovely Assam represents the elation you feel that this project is now in full bloom. The UN Secretary General earlier this year said that gender inequality and discrimination against women and girls is seen as an overwhelming global injustice. I do believe that a fundamental part of this inequality relates to inadequate economic opportunities. And so it is for this reason I find it is more than fitting to bring you some remarks from the Minister with responsibility for economic development, housing, urban renewal, transport, and civil aviation, Honorable Guy Joseph.
Pleasant good afternoon to all. I will adopt the protocol list already established, but acknowledge my colleague ministers. I know it's a busy time, and it's a good thing that we all can be here together as we focus on the continuing crisis that COVID-19 has brought this world into. By all accounts, it is perhaps the worst global disaster since the Second World War. And while COVID has presented many unique and unprecedented challenges and has revealed so many things in so many ways, for my brief presentation, I will highlight just a few, at least 3 of them. Firstly, it is both health and economics. It has caused a shock in the world, both from a health perspective and from an economic perspective. And both unfolded simultaneously. It puts governments in a very difficult position to be able to balance the decisions between the health of the people and the economic well-being of the people. And sometimes having to grapple with such decisions, you ask at some point which one is more important. I am happy to be part of a government where we had already decided that the health would come first, because without the health, there is no benefit to what you gain economically. And so it is getting to the point where you strike the right balance. Secondly, this issue is a global issue. We have not seen anything in our lifetimes that have impacted the world in such a short space of time. Every corner of the globe have been impacted. And so it is local, it is regional, it is international, it is global. It puts all countries in a position, whether you are big or you are small, to focus on how you are going to respond. Thirdly, there is a lot of uncertainty as it relates to this global pandemic. And while things may be leveling off in the world, we are hearing so much about a second wave. And we ask ourselves, are we really prepared? Can this world handle a second wave of COVID-19? And so while we await this magical vaccine that is supposed to come about, we must still deal with the issues that confront us on a day-to-day basis. We still have to do what we must do to keep the country operational. And we are so grateful for all the partners who have stepped in one way or the other, including our local population, our ministries, our frontline workers, everybody, in one way or the other, have contributed in something that helps us. It is also evident that the small islands like ours may have fared a lot better in the handling of this COVID pandemic in terms of the results. Financially, we may not be the best, but in terms of the health and safety, I think that we can applaud ourselves that we stand tall among the countries of the world today. Not that we are out of it in any way, but that we've done something that the rest of the world can look at us and say, maybe there are some lessons that we can learn from these tiny islands in the Caribbean. Because I don't speak only of St. Lucia, but the region as a whole, I think we've done well enough in this situation. As we reflect on the program of gender, it is evident that despite the gains made by so many countries, that all of this could have been erased overnight by this COVID pandemic. Moving from an unemployment rate of 16.8 towards the end of 2019 to a massive unemployment rate as we speak today, which was caused primarily by COVID-19. Moving from 4 years of consecutive growth in the economy to a year where we would see maybe the greatest decline in the economy that we have ever registered in St. Lucia. These are all signs that tell us that COVID is truly unprecedented in terms of the world outlook. We look to our bigger brothers and sisters to lead the charge to find a vaccine against COVID. But we also look to them for financial support and assistance. And we are truly grateful that the Canadian government did step in for this particular initiative, as we have seen done by the World Bank, the IMF, the Caribbean Development Bank, the government of the Republic of China and Taiwan, and so many others who have come to our aid in this time of need. And talking about the unemployment situation brought about by COVID, our women would be the most impacted within that sector because of the number of persons employed in the jobs that are most affected. Let's take the tourism sector as an example, with all of our hotels closed. The number of parents, women, single mothers, whose only means of income was through the tourism industry. Those who have been vendors for all their lives, taking care of their family, all have been impacted. And so, while St. Lucia is focused on a very strong program of construction activity to help mitigate against the full impact of unemployment, we see that the women of this country would be the ones most impacted because they are least involved in the construction sector. And that is why I believe that this program today is one that is very vital. Though it is targeted to a limited number of women in the society, but it is significant. Because when we look at the overall program and approach of this government towards the pandemic, when the NIC stepped in and when the non-contributors to the NIC, the arrangements were put in place so that the informal sector could get some income support. We've seen what is being done for the farmers and what is being done for the fishermen. All of these combined together with programs of this nature, what the enabling gender responsive in response in this disaster situation, what it is doing is going to impact the lives of 75 women. But we know that every woman's life that is impacted positively has a multiplier effect on the community, on the household, and on the country. And so that is why we express our deep thanks and appreciation for the approach of this project to target this particular sector, because they are the most vulnerable and they are the ones most impacted. They are not the ones who get the everyday hand-to-mouth job in construction, in the driving sector, and in the various areas. These are the caretakers of the homes. These are the people who really know how to manage the meager resources. I am always amazed at the ability of a lady to handle the finances of the home. To be able to care for 4 and 5 children with a meager salary that is not sometimes, not even on a regular basis, but they make it. They help their family. They send their children to school. And even when there are absent fathers in the equation, these women measure up to their full responsibility. And I believe that as a government and as a people, we have to applaud this. And I applaud the persons within the various ministries, Ministry for Gender Relations, Ministry for Equity, and my team from the Ministry of Economic Development. And I have to tell you, I got raving reviews from the team at Gender Relations for your involvement, both PS and Mr. Descat, for your contribution towards seeing to it that this program materialized within the time frame. And to everyone who has been involved in one way or the other, I join my voice with those who will come after me to say a special thank you. And while we cannot reach every woman in this country with this program, but we believe that the combination of all that we are doing collectively through the generosity of organizations such as this would go a long way in helping to mitigate the full negative impact of COVID-19, especially on the more vulnerable gender in our society, the women. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Joseph, for this thought-provoking address. Of course, speaking about the balance between health and economics in St. Lucia, the impact COVID has had in terms of unemployment of women, as well as noting how well our small island states have managed COVID-19, something I think we all should be very, very proud of. Our next speaker is someone who embodies the passion and desire to see the transformation needed to bring St. Lucia closer to a more gender progressive and gender sensitive nation. I speak of none other than the Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development, Honorable Dr. Gail Rigobert.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, colleague ministers Joseph and Montoute, and Mr. Master of Ceremony, with your kind permission, may I adopt the protocol already established, and to say to our distinguished guests in studio and those who are joining us online, good afternoon. Today, the government of St. Lucia, in collaboration with a number of our partners, continue to respond positively to the needs of our citizens, particularly in these trying times where the impact of the global pandemic, COVID-19, continues to disrupt our daily lives as we once knew it. While we have done remarkably well as a country to manage the spread of the coronavirus, placing the health and safety of our people above all else, we have had to do so while grappling with the economic impact that the pandemic has had on our small island state and find meaningful and effective ways to respond. One of the outputs of the project, enabling gender-responsive disaster recovery, climate and environmental resilience in the Caribbean, EnGenDER, which we are launching here today, is one such response. Just to review the genealogy of this, in September of 2019, when life was certainly what we would have described as normal, St. Lucia, along with 8 other Caribbean countries, participated in the launch of the regional project enabling gender-responsive disaster recovery, climate and environmental resilience in the Caribbean, commonly referred to as EnGenDER. This project, which was funded by the Global Affairs Canada and the then UK Department for International Development, DFID, now called Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, in partnership with the UN Women Multi-Country Office, the United Nations Development Programme, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and World Food Programme, again reflecting the value of our multi-sectoral, multi-agency partnership. The overall aim of EnGenDER is to further integrate gender equality and human rights-based approaches into disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and environmental management, and interventions to identify and address the gaps to ensure equal access to disaster risk reduction and climate change and environment solutions for men, women, boys, and girls. The prioritized sectors for St. Lucia are fisheries, water and agriculture, the 3 sectors with already developed sector adaptation plans. The project is coordinated at the national level with a national mechanism for decision-making, which includes representatives from the Departments of Economic Development, Sustainable Development, Gender Relations, Agriculture, Fisheries, Equity, Water Resource Management, NEMO, Coalition of Civil Society Organizations, National Youth Council, and, very importantly, the Network of Rural Women's Producers. Through this project, the Government of Canada has committed $1.14 million towards efforts to tackle gender-based violence and COVID-19 in 9 participating Caribbean countries. Through the Government of St. Lucia, the EnGenDER-funded COVID-19 response has allocated $100,000 to support the implementation of income supplemental initiatives which will benefit women in the informal sector, women farmers, and women living with disabilities. Assistance will also be provided to activities that tackle gender-based violence, such as online training in psychological first aid for essential workers and the procurement and distribution of personal protective equipment to frontline workers who provide aid to women. And so what we are witnessing here today is the launch of the EnGenDER-funded COVID-19 response, coordinated by the National Mechanism for Decision Making, very ably supported by my colleagues in the Department of Gender Relations, in tandem with the various stakeholders and agencies. The SANUSHA initiative will include the following. 1. Income support for female-headed households who form part of the informal sector and have lost their jobs due to COVID-19, as well as women farmers and women with disabilities. 2. Online training in psychological first aid for essential workers, health, agriculture, social workers, police, who are realizing community engagement activities with vulnerable persons at risk for or victims of domestic violence. Next, support to the procurement and distribution of PPEs to health officers, police and agriculture extension and fishery officers who are on the distribution front line. Let me add that this initiative comes on the heels of the Government of St. Lucia's launch of the Economic Recovery and Resilience Plan, as announced by Prime Minister Honorable Alan Shastney in April of this year, in which he indicated that stemming the hemorrhaging of our economy and livelihoods of ordinary St. Lucians is a priority. The government of St. Lucia applauds the Canadian government, and Madam Consul General, please convey our best thanks, our profound thanks and best wishes to the government of Canada and the people of Canada for their continued support and partnership, especially at a time like this. We applaud your generosity, especially given our compounded vulnerability, being reminded that we are in the hurricane season as well, and for agreeing to reprogram these funds to lend our assistance in a very practical, tangible way for the most vulnerable, those impacted by COVID-19, in our case, in the context of this initiative, our women. The needs and challenges of the most vulnerable exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic cannot be adequately addressed with existing budgets and programs. On behalf of the government and people of St. Lucia, I would therefore like to express our immense gratitude to the generous support of the Government of Canada and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office through the Enabling Gender-Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean project, for the collaboration of funds to deal with urgent needs of our people who have been caught unprepared in the economic and social impacts of this crisis. I must also publicly express my gratitude to the Director of Gender Relations, Ms. Janie Joseph, the National Mechanism for Decision Making, and staff at the Department of Gender Relations as well as all the other departments represented here who have participated meaningfully in making this a reality. It is this sort of demonstrative action, coupled with my government's commitment and action via policy and otherwise, which continue to demonstrate our desire to move the subject of gender responsiveness from discussion to action, while ensuring that gender equality is a cross-cutting theme in our National Development Plan. It is my dream that one day we will move past the negative gender stereotypes and the economic biases that are discriminative. Today's activity is one small step in that right direction, which I know will go a long way in bringing about some measure of change in the lives of some of the disadvantaged among us as we continue on our journey to building a new gender-balanced St. Lucia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rigobert, for those inspiring words. And as Minister, I know that there is so much more that we can look forward to in terms of initiatives from the Department of Gender Relations. Our next speaker will be joining us via Zoom, which is the new normal these days. He's Mr. Hugo Blanco, and he's currently the resident representative, AI, of UNDP Multi-Country Office for Barbados and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Just a little about Mr. Blanco. In August 2019, he was appointed a Deputy Resident Representative. Mr. Blanco was formerly the Senior Recovery Advisor for Barbados and the OECS, and since 2014 was based in New York as a Regional Advisor based for Crisis and Conflict for the Regional Bureau for Latin America and the Caribbean. In September 2017, he was deployed to the Commonwealth of Dominica following the impact of Hurricane Maria. In April 2015, he was a part of the surge planning mission that was sent to Nepal after the earthquake. In 2014, he was seconded to Ebola coordination team and provided support to technical task force, including those on early recovery and cash payments. In 2013 and 2014, Hugo was a special assistant first to the Deputy Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, and then to the UN Assistant Secretary General and Regional Director for the same region. From 2010 to 2012, he moved to Haiti after the earthquake, and from 2007 to 2010, he was in charge of the disaster risk reduction portfolio in UNDP Vietnam and worked in HQ with the Bureau of Crisis Prevention and Recovery as Global Pool Funds Manager. Moreover, he is part of the UNDAC team managed by OCHA. Hugo also was the Spanish representative to the tsunami response in Indonesia between the years 2005-2006. Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Mr. Hugo Blanco, UNDP Resident Representative AI, United Nations Development Program, Barbados, and the Eastern Caribbean Sub-Regional Office to address us via Zoom at this time.
Thank you very much, Masters of Ceremony, for this very generous presentation. I believe that a protocol has been established, but let me say how honored and pleased I am to be part of this event with Honorable Minister Rigobert, Minister Joseph, Minister Montut, colleagues in St. Lucia, and colleagues connecting from online, and particularly with the support of Canada. This is a very important event because it gives us the opportunity to showcase the efforts put in place by the government and its partners in response to the outbreak of COVID. EnGenDER, as Minister Rigobert just mentioned, is an interagency initiative led by UNDP, but only possible thanks to the great collaboration of other partners such as UN Women, World Food Programme, and CIDIMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Agency. This initiative, as you know, has been funded by the Government of Canada and the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It aims to improve climate resilience for women, girls, and key vulnerable populations and future generations in 9 countries of the Caribbean, and St. Lucia is one of them. Under the leadership of the governments of the region and in the framework of UNDP Global Response to COVID, more than $1 million have been reprogrammed to support government's actions by addressing the immediate compelling needs of the most vulnerable groups in 9 countries. Interventions in the different countries vary according to the needs and priorities identified in each country. I'll mention very briefly that the 3 main areas of work. The first one is to support initiatives to tackle gender-based violence and provide direct assistance to women victims of violence. The second is related to income support to the most vulnerable, including female-headed households, persons with disabilities, the elderly, and individuals who unfortunately has lost their jobs due to COVID. And the third main area of work is the support to initiatives that facilitate the delivery of essential goods and services, such as food, medicines, personal protective equipment, such as masks, hand sanitizers, etc., or services associated to that. In St. Lucia, and I won't enter into too many details because Minister Rigobert has very well explained that the main activities relate to the procurement of and distribution of personal protective equipment and the provision of income support to women employed by the informal sector, women farmers and women with disabilities. One thing that I think is very important to highlight is the reprogramming efforts led by the government and supported by Canada. These show how the UN and the governments can work together and adapt to a changing environment, demonstrating that EnGenDER is one of these projects that is designed to meet the needs on the ground and align with the national priorities. It's well known that the disease outbreaks affect women and men differently. We know that. Minister Joseph has mentioned it. And epidemics make these existing inequalities for women and girls and discrimination of other marginalized groups, as such persons with disabilities, even worse. In the Caribbean, for example, women are the primary caregivers in many households. We know that. And comprise approximately 70% of critical roles in the health and the social sectors. Consequently, women not only bear a greater social burden, but face an increased risks of exposure as frontline workers in this crisis. We also know that in humanitarian crisis, the level of sexual and or inmate partner violence based on gender inequality grow more acute due to displacement, broken social and protective networks, or simply lack of services due to lockdowns or others. In this regard, for example, containment measures embraced as a means of suppressing the spread of COVID-19, such as self-isolation and physical distancing, have resulted in victims being confined with their abusers and with little access to support services. Other groups of population, such as elderly or persons with disabilities, have also faced unique challenges in this crisis, as the situation can be compounded by existing barriers, including limited access to healthcare, an absence of protection network, or existing stigma and discrimination. This is something that many countries are facing right now, the stigma and discrimination due to COVID. Overall, we have observed that the global pandemic and the effect of climate change have been serving as poverty multipliers, forcing already vulnerable groups such as women and girls into further poverty, and the inequality is sustained and reinforced. I'd like to mention that Minister Joseph highlighted the economic impact that this crisis is having. According to recent UNDP research, it's foreseen that up to 7 years of development gains can be lost due to COVID. All the efforts, all the progress, all the gains towards the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda may be lost due to COVID. And this is a big impact. At this stage, it becomes evident that parallels can be drawn between pandemic and climate change. The ongoing health pandemic and climate change illustrates how inequalities are a major barrier to ensuring the well-being of people, and how social and economic equalities materialize in unequal access to essential services. In this context, EnGenDER shows an unique contribution to the Caribbean development, and it is a programmatic platform that looks at the needs and priorities of the women and the most vulnerable, and offers concrete, tangible approaches to face the challenges that we are experiencing. To conclude, and on behalf of the UN team supporting this initiative, I'd like to thank and congratulate the government of St. Lucia for being a champion in the fight against COVID and in the fight against climate change. COVID may be old news in 2 years, 3 years, let's see, but climate change, unfortunately, is here to stay. So this vision that the government of St. Lucia has to be acknowledged and appraised. For UNDP, it's a real pleasure being part of this joint effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blanco. And I think towards the end there, the comments about climate change are very well placed, given the fact that our Minister for Gender Relations is also the Minister for Sustainable Development. Our next speaker also joining us via Zoom. The impact of his work, well, he has worked, I'm told, in every country, every continent, except Antarctica. I probably need to check what the COVID situation in Antarctica is following this launch. Mr. Steve Jaltima is the political counselor at Canada's High Commission in Bridgetown, covering OECS countries, as well as Barbados, the British Overseas Territories, and St. Martin. Mr. Jaltima has worked for Global Affairs for 15 years, most recently as head corporation at Canada's mission to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Jakarta, Indonesia. He has also served at Canada's embassy in Bolivia, and prior to joining Global Affairs Canada in Lesotho with the UN and Zimbabwe with an NGO. His work, as I indicated earlier, in international development and international relations has covered all continents, except, of course, the Antarctica. And he's always looking for opportunities to share Canadian experience and learn experiences and ideas from abroad that may also benefit Canadians. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Mr. Steve Jaltima to join us via Zoom.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'd like to start by thanking earlier speakers for establishing protocol. It's always a blessing and a curse to be one of the later speakers in an event such as this. A blessing because protocol has been established and we can jump right in. Slightly a curse because I have to disregard about half of my prepared remarks because they've been more eloquently stated by earlier speakers. I do want to say a special thanks and how grateful I am to see the enormous commitment of the government of St. Lucia in having 3 ministers present as well as high-level officials and civil society joining in person and online. That really shows the level of commitment and ownership over these activities, and of course the partnership with other donors and with the multilateral system and our great colleagues in the UN. Who would have imagined that in 2020 our lives and the lives of billions, including you and me and all of us joining online right now and on the radio, would have been so disrupted as they have been today. I do hope everyone is keeping safe and well during this difficult time in both their personal and professional lives. And of course, I know that that's not true for everyone. For some, life has not only become increasingly difficult, but it has become dangerous. Because of COVID-19, some people, mainly women and children, are now trapped at home with their abusers, as Hugo explained earlier. Pre-COVID gender equalities, the economic hurdles of COVID-19, and now restricted movement and social isolation measures have led to a global increase in gender-based violence. At the same time, vulnerability has increased. Many people have lost their livelihoods due to the scourge of the pandemic, and those who were already struggling are hit the hardest, many of which are women. Understandably, social services traditionally serving victims of violence and vulnerable people have been disrupted. Many countries around the world, including St. Lucia and including Canada, have seen an increased need to support these services so that they, in turn, can support gender-based violence, victims, and vulnerable people. As such, Global Affairs Canada is proud to support the response to COVID-19 in St. Lucia through our EnGenDER project. Canada has always placed an important lens on women and gender equality, and we recognize that while women are often victims of abuse and are vulnerable, they are also strong advocates and leaders of their own development with their own agency. And we are working through our Caribbean Development Program and the EnGenDER project to support women and vulnerable people in their resiliency. Because the Honorable Minister Rigobert has already explained the elements of the project in quite a lot of detail, I'll skip ahead to the next page of my presentation. COVID-19 has opened up new vulnerabilities, and we hope this support can be used to cushion the effects of same and reduce the disruptions of livelihoods of the most vulnerable, and ultimately reduce the increased risk they now face. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the UNDP and the government of St. Lucia for the lead role they've taken to get this off the ground. Thank you so much. Now, I'd also like to mention that Canada is doing a lot more to support St. Lucia in responding to COVID-19. We've committed $5 million to PAHO to support preparedness, research, and response in the Caribbean, of which St. Lucia is a beneficiary, and we are working with SEDIMA to support the regional response. Additionally, through our Canada CARICOM Climate Adaptation Fund, and it's been established through previous speakers, the very significant link between climate change and COVID-19 and the challenges that they pose to our populations. St. Lucia will be eligible to receive $3 million toward premiums for the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, which can be applied. And we hope that this support will create fiscal space and free up domestic financial resources to allow you to address the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis in your country. And through our existing projects, we are working to support countries to adapt to this new life. For example, through our statistics project, we are working with the National Statistics Office of St. Lucia to adapt to activities, including the census due to COVID-19, and to develop COVID-related indicators and analysis. In addition, our Juris project donated 10 laptops to the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and local St. Lucia judiciary to facilitate communications with the judiciary during COVID-19. Because we're joined by people online and on the radio, I want to just take a moment to say a note to women who may be listening, who are in difficult circumstances. You are strong. You have more power than anyone can imagine, and you are not alone. There are people in St. Lucia, many of them joining online right now, victim services, support systems, the government of St. Lucia, and partners who are there to support you through this very difficult time. So I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge people who may be in difficulty, to say, we are with you. I want to thank the government of St. Lucia, my partners from the UN system and civil society for the opportunity to give some brief remarks today, and I'm very excited with the work we'll be doing together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Altima. Our next speaker is Tony Broadburn. She's added an extra N to her name for emphasis. Tony Broadburn is a representative AI for the UN Women Multi-Country Office, Caribbean. Ms. Broadburn served as Deputy Representative from 2015 to 2020 with the MCO Caribbean. Before this, she was the team leader for the Advancing Gender Justice in the Pacific program with the UN Women Fiji Multi-Country Office. Ms. Broadburn served as the gender specialist for the United Nations Development Program in South Africa, as well as briefly with the UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Office, and established what is now the UN Women Country Office in Haiti. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ms. Tony Broadburn.
Many thanks, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. And as all protocols has been established, I'll jump right in, as our colleague from Canada said. I really do want to reiterate again the amazing demonstration of political will that we're seeing from St. Lucia and the presence of all of the ministers, permanent secretaries. It is really a great demonstration of the commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment. We also want to thank our development partners that really made this project, Global Affairs Canada and the newly rebranded Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, as well as, of course, our sister agency, UNDP, who never forgets us and ensures that we're on board, our other UN agency colleagues like WFP, and other distinguished participants. I am delighted to join with colleagues on the occasion of this launch to bring remarks from the UN Women Multi-Country Office in the Caribbean, not only because it marks an important point of collaboration as we work together to strengthen gender-responsive disaster resilience in St. Lucia and around our Caribbean region, but particularly because the importance of this project is as relevant as ever in the context of the challenges presented by COVID-19. When we say gender responsive, we're not saying it because it is an aside or a silo. We're saying it because it is critical to the achievement of all of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is critical to disaster and crisis planning because it is critical to development. And one of the things that the minister mentioned earlier that I wanted to speak to, and this is Minister Joseph, the fact that we're in a pain point, and after the Second World War, the UN actually was one of the best outputs out of that moment, which was quite painful. And hopefully we can see some as innovative and as critical to global development come from this moment of pain. And the resilience work that comes from the EnGenDER project is the kind of work that would lead to that kind of a movement. Jobs in tourism, as many persons have said, hospitalities and service sectors especially, are facing a decline due to the lockdowns of national borders to contain the spread of the coronavirus. And as the former UN Women representative Alison McLean would always say, we are little in the Caribbean, but we are Taloa. It's a fantastic Jamaican saying that says there's a lot to be gained from the Caribbean, and St. Lucia also being one of the countries that have contributed so many Nobel laureates to the world knows that our successes in containing the spread of the virus is not the only moment in which our region, and St. Lucia in particularly, has demonstrated our leadership and our capacity to rise to the occasion. 27% of people in the Eastern Caribbean countries and territories are estimated to lose their jobs due to COVID-19. And in July, a CARICOM WFP survey found that 70% of respondents from the Eastern Caribbean countries and territories faced job loss or reduced income in the household, compared to 49% in April. So we are feeling it. In St. Lucia, like in other countries across the Caribbean, as everyone has said before me, women have a lower employment rate. In St. Lucia, it's 53% as compared to men at 64%. And the truth is that mainly women are employed in the hospitality, tourism, and services sectors. You have 78% of women in clerical positions and 69% of women in the services and sales sector. However, men represent a larger proportion of own account workers and employers. This means increased stress on their ability to pay their employers and threats to their livelihoods as own account workers in the hospitality sector. The loss of income security diminishes women's abilities to provide for themselves and their families, or to leave vulnerable situations, including situations of intimate partner violence, and that sometimes leads persons to very difficult situations of transactional sex, which has been reported to also be on the rise, not only in our region, but globally. Coupled with this, we have to acknowledge the demands on time. And women generally have the larger responsibility of unpaid care work in households. And this has multiplied as many women and women-headed households are involved in full-time care of children who are out of work, as care of the sick and care of the elderly, as well as other dependents. The gendered impacts of COVID-19 have also included the fact that many men who were also engaged in the sectors most affected by COVID-19, as I mentioned above, the own account workers and employers, are under stress as to how to support their families. Recent research on intimate partner violence demonstrates that economic insecurity is a significant risk factor for increased levels of intimate partner violence. And Caribbean countries for which violence against women surveys were undertaken are in line with or exceed the global average of 1 in 3 women having experienced violence against women at the hands of an intimate partner in their lifetime. Therefore, it is no surprise that with the onset of COVID-19, we have also seen the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence increasing, at home, online, and in public spaces. After consultation with the National Gender Machinery and the EnGenDER project partners, we've been able to repurpose funds to support COVID-19 response efforts in St. Lucia and across all of the project countries. The COVID-19 response program is therefore truly a program that is informed by the persons who it seeks to serve. It's not a top-down approach. It is a partnership and a collaborative approach that is geared towards strengthening the access to support for survivors of gender-based violence, as well as all of those who are in marginalized communities. The repurposed funds include economic empowerment for women's small and micro businesses and a country-specific gender impact assessment to assess the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on women and men. It's critical that we know that men and women, girls and boys have different and specific needs. A gender-blind or even a gender-neutral approach is not adequate and will not address the specific needs of those who we seek to serve. It is critical to know the who, what, and why. And this is why these kinds of assessments are important. To get the data to interrogate what works for who, why, and what does not. Findings from the gender impact assessments will support the government of St. Lucia to leverage gender-responsive budgeting and planning, part of the EnGenDER program, to support transformative initiatives to address the multiple challenges of COVID-19 and an already record-level active hurricane season. We're ready at N. COVID-19 has placed front and center the work that has often been done in disaster preparedness and reduction. We must be flexible and efficient. Yesterday, Parliamericas and UN Women supported a virtual roundtable for parliamentarians to share better practices and challenges on gender-responsive disaster planning. While there are many challenges, we don't have to look too far to find innovation. There are Caribbean countries who are digitizing support, using electronic wallets to provide financial support to citizens, taking into account the need for physical distancing to reduce risk of exposure to COVID-19 for staff of social service agencies and their clientele. And St. Lucia shared better practices in place not only to mitigate the financial challenges, but also to support prevention and responses to gender-based violence. St. Lucia has sustained gains over the past decade in the number of women engaged in disaster risk reduction already, particularly in the composition of the 18 district emergency committees, and in addition, climate change initiatives, including the preparation of the National Adaptation Plan for St. Lucia, are highly driven by women, both at the coordination and participatory levels. So as we develop and implement initiatives that are relevant to the fiscal realities of the Caribbean small island developing states and build on our strengths, we need to know that disaster risk management plans must be linked to the national development strategies and gender action plans of a country. The EnGenDER project recognizes these interlinkages and notes that the gender machinery, the National Gender Bureau, in not only St. Lucia, but all of the countries, have an essential role to play in contributing to the analysis of these plans and the implementation of these plans. St. Lucia is really a leader in this regard, and I do want to give strong recommendation and just to highlight the strength that Ms. Janie Joseph and her team has really given to the Bureau and the work that is not only done in St. Lucia, but regionally. And I want to also acknowledge that the National Gender Machinery in St. Lucia has fostered effective collaboration, not only on the EnGenDER project, but it's a driving force along with the other national stakeholder agencies towards achieving national climate change adaptation and disaster risk resilience for the people of St. Lucia. And in doing so, we see St. Lucia's National Adaptation Plan and the development linkages quite clearly. Just this week, with our colleagues from UNFPA, we were working through the next steps for establishing and implementing shock-responsive and effective gender-based violence referral pathways. A few of my mentors, my mother and Alison McLean, the former representative, also often reminded me about our spheres of influence and our spheres of control. The reality is that despite our levels of preparedness in various sectors and at various levels in our societies, the impact of COVID-19 and any other disaster, any other natural hazard could become a disaster to our key sectors because it is beyond our control. There are some things that are just beyond our control. This has required us to specifically address gender inequality issues and women's empowerment with considerations in policy and plan development, because these are the things that are within our spheres of influence. I'd like to close with a reminder about many of the tools that already exist to support gender transformative responses, from the Sustainable Development Goals to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, and the Beijing Platform for Action, which celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. While St. Lucia last presented to the CEDAW committee in 2006, I know that there's a plan underway for submission soon, and St. Lucia has presented its Beijing Plus 25 report, which really demonstrates the progress made in gender responsive development in the country. In fact, as many of you know, the 75th session of the General Assembly will convene at the United Nations headquarters on the 15th of September. And on the 1st of October, there will be a high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the Beijing Platform for Action. And this is the first time that a special session on Beijing has been convened since 2000. We hope and think that this is a real moment for St. Lucia and the Caribbean to demonstrate how the innovations made by programs and projects like the EnGenDER project have contributed to resilience and sustainable development more broadly. I thank you, and we look forward to the continued implementation of the program and partnership with the government of St. Lucia.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tony Broadburn, and that passion and enthusiasm was coming through quite clearly there via Zoom. Our next presenter, and I thank Ms. Joseph, his presence here is testimony that all T's have been crossed, all dots are there, and the funds are ready to be disbursed through his ministry. I now call on Honorable Minister Leonard Montoute, Minister for Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment, to address us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, and in the interest of time, I will adopt the protocol I already established, and to start by saying it is a pleasant afternoon for me, and I'm sure for everyone here, and I would like to express thanks for the invitation to share my brief thoughts at this gathering occasioned by the existing situation as a result of the impact of this health pandemic, COVID-19. Before I do so, however, let me indicate that my ministry, the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment, is extremely pleased to partner with all agencies represented here today to deliver on such an important and timely initiative. We are also immensely grateful to the various donors who have made this worthy contribution to our people. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all aware of the vulnerability of St. Lucia to multiple hazards, whether it be natural or man-made. From the growing number and severity of climate-related events to the constant threats of geological hazards such as earthquakes and the outbreak of diseases such as the coronavirus, among others, St. Lucia's exposure is well known, and so too is the potential for significant devastation with a disproportionate impact on poor and vulnerable households. We may also be aware of St. Lucia's most recent poverty statistics from the 2016 Survey of Living Conditions, which shows that approximately 25% of households are deemed to be living below the poverty line. Given the impact of COVID-19, both current and projected, we anticipate very dire circumstances for these vulnerable households, as well as others who have now become vulnerable, and as such, targeted interventions such as this one are urgently required and welcomed. From my vantage point as the Minister responsible for equity, I can speak of all too familiar increasing numbers of people coming to the ministry seeking assistance. I can also speak very accurately of the increasing range of needs being articulated to which urgent responses are required by my ministry despite our meager resources. And so my ministry is acutely aware of the growing needs of households as well as the growing number of households who are justifiably seeking assistance at this time. As a ministry, we continue to facilitate the implementation of initiatives in response to COVID-19, but with the deliberate intention of building resilience of households for effective response or adaptation to various shocks in the long term. I know that the objective of this project synchronizes very nicely with the mandate of my ministry, and I foresee lots of coherence and collaboration during the implementation. I also see great scope for synergies and effective partnerships between this project and the various projects being administered through the Ministry of Equity, in particular the SDG Fund project and the Human Capital Resilience project. Having said this, I will speak of the direct involvement of the ministry in this component of the EnGenDER project to ensure complete understanding of processes and considerations used. Working with a national coordinating team, the ministry has led on implementing the income support pillar for female-headed households who form a part of the informal sector and have lost their jobs during COVID-19. This pillar also targeted women farmers and women with disabilities. Based on this criteria, eligible persons or households were identified through several networks and agencies, including the Women's Support Shelter, the Family Court, the Welfare Services Unit of the Ministry, the National Council of and for Persons with Disability, and the St. Lucia Network of Rural Women Producers. Of course, verification was conducted by the Ministry of Equity to ensure that there is no double dipping and that the resources available locally are being distributed equitably as possible. In other words, the selected individuals or households are not benefiting from any other income support program being implemented currently. We are therefore pleased to inform that under the project, a total of 75 female-headed households will benefit by receiving $500 per month for 5 months, retroactive from July 2020. One individual will also receive a one-time sum of $500. And so, as I close, I wish to specifically recognize the generosity of Global Affairs Canada and UK Department for International Development for financing this project in partnership with UN Women Multi-Country Office, the United Nations Development Programme, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and the World Food Programme. Thank you. As a ministry, we commit to continue working collaboratively with everyone, whether donors, partners, stakeholders, towards the creating and sustaining of a brighter tomorrow for our people. We hold steadfast the belief that a social protection system which is designed to anticipate and respond to shocks in coordination with other sectors can play a critical role in building the resilience of vulnerable households to deal with internal and external stresses, and as such, we are determined to reform the social protection landscape in a manner consistent with this philosophy. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Leonard Montoute. We come into the end of our program here today. We now invite a representative from a group of women who will be benefiting from this project. I now call on Ms. Robin Darrell, who will be presenting the vote of thanks today, and she's the president of the Network of Rural Women Producers.
Good afternoon to all. I'd like to adopt the protocol already established. This entire press launch has been a huge thank you, but gratitude is not the sort of thing that gets still. So it is my honor to thank everyone who made today possible, who made today successful. I can't begin to do so without saying a big thank you to God for great weather and for sparing us so far the brunt of the health impact of COVID-19. On behalf of the government and people of St. Lucia, the multi-stakeholder national mechanism for decision-making and the many beneficiaries of this EnGenDER COVID response, I would like to especially thank the following people. The Government of Canada, through the Political Counselor of the Canadian High Commission in Barbados, Mr. Steve Jaltimer, the United Nations Development Programme under the leadership of Hugo Blanco, and all other team members, Sherry Frederick, Mariam Ale, Misha Clark, and the entire team who are working so hard with St. Lucia throughout the implementation of this project. The UN Women Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean, under the leadership of Ms. Tony Ann Broadburn and her entire team, Kayana Bowen, Ishua Ayahen, Sharon Carter-Burke, Marcia Levine, and all who are working tirelessly to get St. Lucia to take advantages of this and so many other opportunities towards achieving gender equality. The Ministry of Economic Development, Housing, Urban Renewal, Transport and Civil Aviation under the leadership of Honorable Guy Joseph, the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Claudius Emmanuel, the Chief Economist, Social Planner and Accountant for facilitating this process and providing coordination and guidance to the National Mechanism for Decision Making. The Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations and Sustainable Development under the leadership, guidance, and inspiration of the Honorable Minister, Dr. Gail Rigobert, and her team, both at the Department of Gender Relations under the direction of Ms. Jani Joseph, and the Department of Sustainable Development under the guidance of the Chief Environment and Sustainable Development Officer, Mrs. Annette Leo, and her team of officers, who are technical experts guiding the EnGenDER implementation in St. Lucia. The Minister of Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment under the leadership of the Honorable Minister Leonard Montout and the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Velda Joseph, the Deputy Director, Social Transformation, Ms. Tanzia Toussaint, and the entire team who the key implementing agency of the biggest output under this project. To the other members of the National Mechanism for Decision Making NEMO, Ministry of Finance, Network of Rural Women Producers, St. Lucia Coalition of Civil Society Organization, Ministry of Agriculture, thank you for your hard work behind the scenes. The staff of GIS and the Command Center, thank you for your kind accommodation. And to the other members of the media, thank you for your coverage. Thanks to the caterers, those involved in serving. And as the president of a beneficiary organization, I would like to thank all of you already mentioned for your assistance and, more importantly, for including us in the planning of your efforts aimed at benefiting us. To the Master of Ceremonies and all those who spoke or contributed in any way to the ceremony, I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Robin Darrell. I just have one little concern that you spoke of refreshments, that it may not be some of that famous Miku chocolate. The minister is the ambassador for those chocolates. And for those of you who may not know, the Network of Rural Women Producers, they make some amazing chocolates, condiments, which I always enjoy when I partake in them. So I'm hoping that some miracle could happen, Minister. You may have a stash in your vehicle. Just to summarize what we have witnessed here today, the government of St. Lucia, through the Department of Gender Relations, have just launched the EnGenDER project, which seeks to provide income support for a total of 75 female-headed households, rural women involved in agriculture. We just witnessed the Rural Women Producers president, as well as PP and psychosocial support. We have a representative from the fire service. They'll be one of the beneficiaries as well as our police. Again, let me just reiterate, thanks to the staff at GIS, NTN, all our partners, 93.5 WVNT, for joining us. And of course, to you, our viewers, and our listeners here today, and our in-studio audience, thank you for gracing us with your presence here today. Thank you, and that's it for me here.